Hi, I'm River, your iTeacher. Do you need help with writing? Well, in today's lesson, that's what we're going to talk about. Let's get started. Perhaps you need to do writing for your job, or maybe you're preparing for an English exam and you want to practice your writing. In today's lesson, I'm going to give you some tips about how you can improve your writing by organizing it, using good transitional expressions, checking your writing, and also we'll talk about some ways that you can get ideas. What can you put in your writing? To do this, we're going to follow some steps. The first is called brainstorming. Then we'll look at selecting, rejecting, and grouping. Step number 3 is the layout. Step number 4, writing. And finally, our last step, number 5, is corrections. Before we start writing, we need to prepare. Let's begin with step number 1, brainstorming. So, brainstorming is a way for you to collect ideas. There are different ways you can do it. I'm going to show you one today, which is called a word web. In a word web, we start by writing the topic of our writing, our paper, in the middle of a piece of paper. For today's topic, we're going to use as a question, how do you use the internet? So, on your paper, you can write in the middle, the internet. And in this brainstorming, we're going to try to collect ideas about the internet. When you brainstorm, it's not important to only write good ideas. We write all of our ideas on the piece of paper. Any idea goes on the paper. Because sometimes an idea that is not very good, you write it on the paper, it makes you think of other ideas that are important. So don't worry, don't be too critical about your ideas. Everything goes on the paper in brainstorming. Later, we will choose the best ones. But for now, we put all the ideas. Okay, so we need to think about how you use the internet. So, I'm going to start with the news. I check the internet every day for the news. So on my paper, I write news. Now, when you put information on your piece of paper, you want to think of questions like why. So, I'm going to put some keywords on my paper about why I look at the news on the internet. Well, I like to use the internet for my news because it's easy, it's fast, I can choose the stories that interest me. When you watch TV and watch the news, you have to listen to all the stories. On the internet, you can choose the stories. So on my paper, I write down, choose stories. All right. When you're brainstorming, you might also want to think of examples. So I like to go to BBC World News. I write down BBC on my paper. We don't want to write sentences when we're brainstorming. Just what we call keywords to help remember the ideas we want to write about. Okay, let's go to another reason, another use of the internet. I could write down shopping. So, start with shopping. Again, think about why. Well, I like to shop on the internet because I can find things that are not available in my city. There is a wider choice. On my paper, I write it down. Another reason is that perhaps there are better prices than I can find locally. So on my paper, write down better prices. Again, it's a good idea if you can give an example. So, when I bought my computer, I bought it online. I write down computer. Okay, we'll continue with other things I use the internet for. Can you think of what you use the internet for? Well, I also play games. Why? Well, I like online games, multiplayer, so there are people from around the world. An example could be I play a game called Eve online, so I write down the name. In this game, there are usually 25,000 people playing, so it's easy to find someone. It's entertaining, it's fun. I also use the internet to watch videos. Let's put it down on our brainstorming. Okay, so watching videos. Website, YouTube. That's where you found me. Oh, that's interesting. Because I'm writing videos, YouTube, I can also write down that I use the internet for work. I use YouTube also for teaching and for videos. So I'm going to write that down. Why do I like watching videos on the internet for entertainment? Well, there are so many funny videos on YouTube. Or also if I want to learn something. So on my paper, I write down for learning things. Now, I look at my paper and I think, what else do I use the internet for? I have entertainment. I also like watching music videos. So I'm going to write that down on my paper. I'm thinking now, are there any other things I use the internet for? I use the internet for research. Not only for work, but maybe for cooking. If I'm looking for a recipe, I go online. Research. You know, when I'm planning a holiday or a vacation, I often go online and I research maybe hotels or flights. And when I find a flight, I also buy and book my flights or maybe hotel online. This sounds like travel. Let's give it the name travel. You can see that very quickly, in a few minutes, we begin to have a lot of different ideas on our paper. And that is step one. It's important to do because now we move on to step two, where we select and reject. In this step, we want to choose the ideas from our brainstorming and reject the ideas that are not important. If you have to do a long writing, 10 pages, maybe you use all the information from your brainstorming. But usually in a test situation, and perhaps at work if you're writing a 1 or 2 page report, we don't need all the information. So this is the time, the moment, where we decide which information is the best information for this task. When you're choosing, selecting which ideas to use, remember to think about your level of English, because in your language you can probably write about anything. But if you're writing in English, your level may not be the same. So you want to think about, what can I write about in English? Which of these different ideas is going to be easy for me with my level of vocabulary and my level of grammar? All right? It's important when selecting. When you do a writing, especially in an exam situation, we usually like to have 2 different groups of ideas. So we want to look at our brainstorming and try to think about things that are different. For example, so we want to group together ideas that are similar. You might want to put research and traveling together. Or perhaps you want to put entertainment, watching videos, playing games. So think about which ideas on your paper in the brainstorming are good together, and we can combine them, we can group them. And then finally we need to choose what are our 2 groups. So in today's writing, I look at my brainstorming and I think I want to talk about something a bit serious, or write about something serious. So I'm going to choose work. And then I want something different. I think I'll talk about shopping. It's an easy one for me to do with the information on my brainstorming. So when you select and reject, you look at your brainstorming and you just circle the ideas that you want to use in today's writing. The other ideas are not important. Okay? That's grouping, selecting, and rejecting. We are finished step 2. Now we move on to a very important step. It's the last step before we start writing, and it's called the layout. The layout is a visual representation of how you're going to organize your information. You can see I have 4 boxes, and when you are doing your test or when you are preparing something at home, perhaps for work, you should take a piece of paper and draw 4 big boxes. Each box represents a paragraph. And now we're going to look at our information from the brainstorming, what we selected, and decide where it should go. In our writing, we have some special things we need to remember. Our first paragraph is always our introduction. And our last paragraph is always the conclusion. So we have our 2 groups of ideas, today, work and shopping, and we're going to put those into the second and third paragraph. We'll talk about the introduction and the conclusion in a moment. So now it's the time to decide what are you going to talk about or what are you going to write about first. Shopping or work? In many situations, it doesn't really matter. But in some situations, it's important to choose a logical order. For instance, if you have to write about a problem, you might first want to talk about what the problem is, and then in the next paragraph, talk about the solutions. All right? So you want to think when you're doing your layout, which ideas would be better first and second. Today, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to first write about work, which will be in my second paragraph, and then continue with something a little bit lighter and go on to shopping, which I'll use for my third paragraph. So now we need to fill out, which means put our words in the correct place. We need to fill out our layout. In our layout, we don't usually write sentences. This is just a piece of paper with keywords. The keywords help us remember what we want to write about and the order. Now, you look at your brainstorming and you simply copy the important information to your to your layout. Later, we will turn those into sentences, but now we only need the keywords to remember what we want to write about and the order. When you are doing your layout, you should have at least 6 or 7 words in each box in each paragraph. If you only have 2 words or 3 words, it's not enough information to write sentences, enough sentences for a paragraph. So remember, when your layout is finished, each box should have at least 5, 6, or perhaps more words, keywords. Our second and third paragraphs are finished. We still need to do our first paragraph and our fourth paragraph, which will be the introduction and the conclusion. Okay, let's now talk about the introduction. The introduction in English style writing, there are a few things we must do. The first is that we start writing in English with something called a topic sentence. A topic sentence tells the reader what your writing is about. And in English style writing, we like to give this information immediately. We do this with a topic sentence. And your topic sentence needs to have usually 2 pieces of information. The first piece of information is what the topic is. So today we're talking about, or I should say we're writing about the internet. That's very general. Why are we writing about the internet? Are we writing about the history of the internet? Are we writing about the devices you use to connect to the internet? No. The reason why we are writing is, or the exact reason, we call this the aspect. And in today's writing, the aspect was how you use the internet. So we have two pieces of information. We have the topic, the internet, and the aspect, which is sort of more specifically, why are you writing? We're writing about how we use it. And it's important to get both of those pieces of information in your first sentence. All right? So an example might be something like, the internet is an important part of my life. You can see from the sentence that we're talking about the internet and my life. We understand it's how I use it. Let me give you some other examples of topic sentences with different topics and different aspects. I live in Italy, and here in Italy, well, people love football, okay? Or as they say in American English, soccer. Now, if you had to do a writing on football, that might be your topic, but there could be many different aspects of football. One aspect might be the rules of the game. So you could write a paper about the rules of football. Topic football, aspect, rules. Or you might have the same topic, football, but a completely different aspect, the history of football. So we have two papers. They're both about football, but different aspects. All right? Rules of the game, history. You might have another aspect, football and your favorite team. And this paper is all about fans, your favorite players. All right? So when we have topics, remember we also have aspects. I'll just give you one more example to make sure it's clear. If you were writing about a country, if you had to write about your country, well, that's the topic. The aspect could be very different. You could talk about problems in your country. So, aspect would be problems. Or you could talk about tourism. All right? Completely different aspect. Or maybe you talk about the history of your country. When you know your topic and the aspect, we need to try to put both pieces of information in your first sentence. It's usually possible if you think carefully. If you find it very difficult, well, try to do it in two sentences. Let's go back to my topic sentence, which is the internet is an important part of my life. That's one sentence. Okay, let's think now about how many sentences we need for each paragraph. When you're doing a writing in an exam situation, you probably want to have, we could say, 3 or 4 sentences for your first paragraph. You also want to have 3 or 4 sentences for your last paragraph. I write them down on the layout to help me remember. All right, so you can see on the right, I have 3 or 4 sentences for the introduction, and also 3 or 4 sentences for the conclusion. Now, the second and third paragraph about our main ideas, they should be a little bit longer. So perhaps 4 or 5 sentences for the second paragraph, and 4 or 5 sentences for your third paragraph. If you follow this and you finish your writing and then you count your words, usually you will have enough words for exam situations. All right? You might need to add a sentence, or maybe you might need to eliminate a sentence when you count your words. If you're doing a writing for work, this is not so important. You don't always have to respect a certain number of words. so you have more freedom. But in exam situations, it's good to remember. Okay? So, usually, remember 3 or 4 for the introduction, 3 or 4 sentences for your conclusion, and the middle section, the middle 2 paragraphs, a little bit more. All right. Now, we go back to our introduction. We have 1 sentence. We should have at least 3 or 4 sentences. So, what information do you put in your introduction? To add more information, it's a good idea to give some general information about why the topic is important. We don't want to start with too many details, because the details, for instance, today, work and shopping, well, we already have a place. We have our 2nd and 3rd paragraph. We don't want to start to use this information in the introduction. So we want some general information. Why is the topic important? Well, I use it every day. So I'm going to write down keywords in my introduction, use every day. I can't imagine living without the internet. I use it for so many things. In the last 20 years, the internet has changed everything. My introduction is finished. What do I have in my introduction? I have my topic sentence, and I have some keywords, general information about why the topic is important. Okay, now it's time for the conclusion. In the conclusion, we want to try to summarize information from the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd paragraph. I could also say that I use the internet for other things, all right? Also use the internet for many things in my life every day. I'm going to write down, I use the internet for serious and fun. Now, here is a tip which can make your writing fantastic. Not always possible, but if you can include an idea about the future in your last paragraph, sometimes the last sentence, it's a great way to finish writing. So, if you remember in the 1st paragraph, I want to write about how the internet is only perhaps 20 years old, but it has made great changes in our life. So, in my last paragraph, if I want to include an idea about the future, I could write something like, what other things will we depend on the internet for in the next 20 years? So that is what I call a future idea, and it's a nice way to finish a writing. Another example of a future-looking sentence, if you are doing a writing about a problem. Your last sentence might show if you are optimistic, you think that the future will have good things, or if you are pessimistic about the situation, if you think that the future is going to continue to be a problem concerning your topic. It's a great way to finish your writing. Okay, let's take a look now at our layout. Our layout is finished. We have our introduction, we've got keywords, we have our 2nd paragraph about work, our 3rd paragraph about shopping, our 4th paragraph, a few keywords about summarizing, and maybe our future idea. We are finished now. We are now ready to finally start writing, which is step number 4. Okay, well, because we've done so much preparation, the writing should go very quickly. You don't need to stop and say, oh, what do I write? No. You look at your layout. You have all of your ideas. You have the best ideas from your brainstorming. All of your ideas are organized. You know what information goes in the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, and your 4th paragraph. You are ready to begin. So start writing your sentences. Now, it's not always important to begin with your introduction. What's important in an exam situation, also it's possible for work, is you start writing the easiest paragraph just to begin writing, like a warm-up for the more difficult parts of your writing or paragraphs. So just start writing. If you want to write your conclusion, leave some space on your paper, write your conclusion. If you want to start with the second and third paragraphs, those are usually quite easy. Start with your second and third paragraph. And then when you're finished, you can add your introduction and your conclusion. It's not important the order you write. What is important is that you are writing. You can't just waste time thinking the clock is ticking. In an exam situation, you got to keep going. All right, now, once your writing is finished, we have the last step. Okay, our last step now that we have finished the writing is step number 5, very important, correcting. It's important you check for mistakes because we all make mistakes when we're writing. It's not only about grammar. It could be that you are nervous, you're distracted, and you make what we call a careless mistake. A careless mistake is something that you know, but you make the mistake because you are not concentrating or you are distracted. So you want to go through each paragraph, every sentence, and try to find a few mistakes. If you correct the mistakes before you give your paper at the end of the exam, or you will get a higher score. If they find your mistakes, your score goes down. So now, in an exam situation, you want to try to find 3 or 4 mistakes and get 1 more point, 2 more points. If, on the other hand, this is a writing for your boss, for work, a report perhaps, or maybe you are sending an email to a client, you don't want to send an email full of mistakes or a report. So check every sentence. Important things to check are verbs. Many students have problems. Check your verbs. All right? In English writing, in one sentence, we usually have 1, 2, or 3 verbs. We don't often have more. If you have more verbs, there are many grammatical rules you need to respect, which could be complicated. So your sentences should have 1, 2, or 3 verbs, okay, unless you're a very advanced student. So count your verbs in the sentence. If you have a sentence with 7 verbs or 6 verbs, it's not okay, probably, huh? It's a better idea to break your long sentence into shorter sentences. Another important thing to check are capital letters. Remember, in English, when we write the days of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we use capital letters. Also, when we have the months of the year, January, February, March, use capital letters. Make sure you don't repeat the same word again and again and again. All right? If you have the word, for instance, problem, don't say problem, 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 problem. You could say problem or issue. Use synonyms, different words with the same meaning. All right, now we have finished all of the steps of writing. That's the end of this lesson. I'm sure if you follow the steps, it might seem a little strange the first time, but when you practice it, you will have better results. You will have an organized writing with only the best ideas. And remember, use your transitional words for an excellent piece of writing. Okay, that's it for this video. If you want any help, remember, you can always visit our website, iTeacher.eu. See you next time.